Howdy, Caleb here. I had some of you asking me to update my unit efficiency chart, and so I went a little overboard. I spent a little bit of time. I math hammered every single unit that we had, did a whole bunch of different variants, all the different weapon options, and standard buffs across the board, just seeing what I could come up with. So here's the chart. You can look at this while I'm talking, and we'll dive into it a little bit more. So a couple of things to note. We're looking at average damage versus a 4-up save. So this is this unit just attacking something that has a 4-up save. I'm assuming they're not using all-out defense or any other buffs like that. This just gives us a standard on how to calculate this damage. I'm giving them any kind of standard buffs that they would generally have if you're attacking with them. For instance, the Raptadons would be attacking something on an objective. Aggradons have charged in Koatls Claw, so that means that they get a +1 to wound. Kroxigor are attacking a unit of 10 or more, so those types of things. Ripperdactyls, they're getting the buff from the boss. So these are the standard things that you would use for those units. I'm assuming those are the case for these numbers. The stuff you see on this chart is cumulative. So we see the first column is the unit name. Second one is how many points they are. Third one is average damage, just based off War Scroll. And then I'm adding all-out attack, which is +1 to hit in the next column. Star Priest is just kind of a standard buff that we can put on everything, and so I added it in here. I don't know that it's the most efficient buff we have anymore, but it still does help a lot with mortal wound output. Especially if on some of these units that don't have a lot of rend, it can help. Star Priest has an ability that allows a unit on all their attacks hit wound rolls of 6s are a mortal wound in addition. So a nice buff, especially if you have a lot of attacks. And then the second to last column there is Horror Frost at, I'm assuming -3 Rend, because that's the best one that we can get access to. So we're adding -3 Rend to 1 melee profile on that unit. And then the last column is how many points it costs per 1 damage. So the lower that number is, the more efficient that unit is. So that's our description of what this table is. So let's take a look at some of these items. I think last time we talked about it, it was the Raptadon Chargers were our most efficient unit, and it's still the case here. Now, that doesn't mean we can just spam Raptadon Chargers, because there are some downfalls here. You can see by the final number there, if you stack all these things on them, a great buff here. They end up with quite a bit of damage. Not the most damage in the army, but a lot, especially for their point costs. They're fairly cheap. There are some downsides to the Raptadons, though, so you can't just spam them all. They don't really reinforce very well, which means taking them above the starting unit size. So a normal Raptadon unit is 5. You can reinforce them to 10 models. But because of unit coherency, it's really hard to do that effectively. To really add a whole lot of extra attacks, you'd be going up to like 15 Raptadons. And that's just not very efficient at that point for what you're getting out of the attacks. So they are very good in the role that they have, which is kind of that hitting softer targets that are trying to hold objectives. They're very, very good at that. If you can get the buffs on them, they're going to do a lot of damage, especially for a 150-point model. The Ripperdactyls, on the other hand, do reinforce very well. We just did a video on this last week or something, the week before, where they reinforce very well. Because it's a unit of 3, they can reinforce up to 6, and they don't lose any attacks because of unit coherency. So this is a unit that reinforces well and is still very cheap. So with this new unit coherency rules, I really like the Ripperdactyls. I think they provide a role in a lot of armies that some of these other units don't. They are fast like the Raptadons, but they reinforce really well. You do end up having to add a little bit of support to them here with the Ripperdactyl Chief to get their most bang for their buck. But when you do so, they end up doing some pretty good damage, especially for their points. Kroxigor were our third most efficient unit. I was a little surprised to see them this high. This is the normal Kroxigor, not the War Spawn, and I think they do better because of Horror Frost. They only have -1 rend, so Horror Frost ends up buffing them a little bit more, but they end up fairly efficient. This is assuming they're attacking 10 models. They've got +1 to hit from all-out attack. You need a hero nearby for them to do that, unfortunately. And then they've charged in Coalesced for this one, or in Koatls Claw, so they have +1 to wound. And they end up doing quite well. And this is another unit that reinforces really well. They have 3 models in a standard unit, so 6 will fight pretty hard. You get all these buffs on them, and they are going to punch incredibly well. So I do like these Kroxigor now. It's more efficient as the normal Kroxigor than the War Spawn. The War Spawn, you'll notice, are down here in the white section here. So it's hard not to go for that -2 rend from the War Spawn, but in the end, if you can get the buffs on the Kroxigor, the normal Kroxigor, they're going to do really good. Raptadon Hunters are next. They have very similar profiles to Chargers. Chargers just end up being a little bit better. You can combo them together pretty well if you wanted to, but you can always just take more Chargers for that. Skinks. I was happy to see them here. When I did the math and looked at the Skinks, I was pleasantly surprised. This is the Bolt Spitter and Club version, so you've got a little bit of shooting, a little bit of melee, and they do okay for their points. I think I would be okay reinforcing this unit and putting these buffs on them if I wanted to. It's still not a ton of damage, so you probably aren't going to spend all your buffs on this, but if you have like 10 or 20 Skinks in your list anyway, and this is, turn 3, buff them up, send them in. They can do some damage. So they're not great, but they're only 90 points, and you can get some use out of them. The next one is Agridons, and I'm loving Aggradons right now. I've had a ton of fun playing with them here at home. I've taken them to a tournament, had a lot of fun with them. Got another one coming up soon. Definitely taking Aggradons to that one. I really like Aggradons, and part of it is because you can get quite a bit of damage out of these Aggradons. They come in a unit of 3, so they reinforce extremely well now, and with new unit coherency. And they're a lot tougher than something like the Raptadons. They can take a punch and still provide enough damage output. They are our most damaging unit in the army looking at these buffs. They edge out the Raptadons a little bit, and once you realize that you can reinforce these guys really well, up to a unit of 6 Aggradons is terrifying. And so you'll be getting 50 damage out of this setup here with these Aggradons. So they end up being a very good unit now that we have the new unit coherency. They got movement, they've got toughness, they've got damage output. So a very good all-round unit. I really like Aggradons. If I haven't said that enough yet, I like Aggradons. You can play them in Starborn too. I think they really shine over in Koatls Claw, but they can have a role in Starborn. Imagine dropping them in with the Space Folder Stave on a 7-inch, drop-in, and they've already got +1 to their charge, and you're going to make that charge and be able to hit some stuff. They're not going to do as much damage this way, but, a unit of 6 of these dropping in, 6-inch rerollable charge, and you should be able to take out some key enemy units with that. Pterodon Riders are up here in the green section, which is just an arbitrary color I gave the ones at the top, but they end up being decent for their points, and they can still drop their mortal wounds here. They're just not quite as good as Ripperdactyls. I think I would still rather have the Ripperdactyls for the role that they're going to play. Spawn of Chotek. You'll see this one and the other one, the Glob. So here's the stream. This is a short range one. Not a whole lot different, to be honest, than the Glob, the long range one. Most of this damage, to be honest, is coming from its melee attack profile. So it's not real impressive for the amount of damage it's going to do. I don't think you would ever spend all these buffs on this unit unless you're getting like really desperate. So that is one thing to realize in this. Like the next one, Hunters of Huanche with Bolas, you're never going to put Star Priest and Hoarfrost on this unit. But I wanted to be fair and show what the efficiency of these things are. Skinks with Club and Shields next. I think I would still take the Bolt Spitters over this. Shields aren't going to save these guys if they're getting attacked. Warspawned coming in next. Source Warriors with Spears. This is a good unit here. It's not a ton of damage for the points. Like Aggradons do quite a bit more damage, but what the Warriors offer is that Wound Sink, where if something comes into them, you can buff these Warriors up to do some damage. And so they're generally not going to kill off the whole unit if your opponent's attacking them, and you have a chance to respond. With Spears, I really like Spears because you're able to get a unit of 10. You can get all of these Warriors into combat, and they reinforce well. 20, if you make a good charge, you're going to get all 20 into combat. This does include their bites, but only for the front row. Just FYI, I did factor those in there. So, some other things here. Bastillon with the Arc of Sotek, takes buffs decently well. Guard are just okay. I was wondering. I'm always curious if Guard were gonna get better, but they got more expensive, so I think their efficiency went down a bit. And we get into some of the Carnosaurs and some other variants of the Skinks. Down near the bottom here in the red, we've got like Stegodons and Source Warriors with clubs. Clubs are suffering now because they won't be able to attack with the second rank, so they end up quite a bit lower now because of your loss of number of attacks. I don't think anything down here is real surprising. Obviously, the Slon and Lord Kroak down here, they are not designed to be in melee, so that's why their efficiency is so low. Obviously, Lord Kroak does a lot of damage in the hero phase, not in shooting and melee. So that's why he's down there that low. That doesn't mean he's not good, because Kroak is still very good. One thing I was disappointed to see so low was the Bastillon with Solar Engine. Just not really outputting much damage. And I think that kind of goes with my experience. As I've played him in a couple games, I've been disappointed by him. If we could snipe heroes right now, which we can't really do very well because of the rules in the General's Handbook, I think the Bastillon with Solar Engine would be a lot better. That's kind of what it's designed to do, is snipe heroes, and it just doesn't do enough damage right now. So that's kind of disappointing. All right, so I'll try to link this actual picture below if it's not readable in the video, or if you want to save a copy of it for yourself and justify why you're taking one unit over the other. Here's a perfect table for you. So, all right, whatever that's worth, I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time.